Budget deadline. With July 1st looming, it appears state lawmakers are nowhere near an agreement. What does that mean for schools? And is it too soon to say the word shutdown? Also, what do state lawmakers think about recent violence against politicians? What needs to change to lower the temperature? And we'll dive into the mailbag on this edition. It's Sunday, June 29th, and this is Flashpoint. Welcome in, everyone. Happy Sunday. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We have assembled a roundtable of state lawmakers this morning, and we have a lot to discuss. The budget process appears to be on track to miss a July 1st deadline to pass a budget and present it to the governor. That's mandated by state law, although there's really no penalty for missing it. It's not the first time they will miss that deadline, but it would be the first time in several years. With the fiscal budget year beginning in 3 months, it now sparks fears that it won't be finished in time, which is horrible news for school districts, which need to know how much they'll be getting for the upcoming school year. It also creates worry of a possible government shutdown, which last happened on Governor Jennifer Granholm's watch in 2007. So what's the holdup? We've invited 4 lawmakers to discuss it, as well as some of the other pressing issues in Lansing right now, including recent violence against our elected leaders, even at the state lawmaker level. So let's get into it right now on Flashpoint. Let's say good morning to our panel of lawmakers. First, from the House, Democrat Joe Tate of Detroit and Republican Tim Kelly of Saginaw Township. And from the Senate, Republican Minority Leader Eric Nesbitt of Van Buren County and Democrat Darren Camilleri of Trenton. Right off the top, I do want to mention that we did invite Speaker of the House Matt Hall to participate this week. We were told he was unavailable. In fact, invited all of the members of the quadrant, and the only one who accepted was you, Mr. Nesbitt. So I might as well start with you. What can you report from the leadership meetings when it comes to the budget, and do we think something substantial can get done before July 1st?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. Thanks for covering this. As we know, July 1st deadline is when school districts start going into their fiscal year. The state's fiscal year starts October 1st. And both the House and the Senate have passed their different budgets. Unfortunately, the Senate Democrat budget's already out of balance after 2 years ago when they blasted through a $9 billion surplus, and we're here after this last time. They've already looking at an $800 million deficit from what the Senate has passed. But what I can tell you right now is that from the House Republicans and their plan of what they passed and trying to empower school districts a little bit more, we need to shake up what we're doing in education a lot more than what we're seeing right now. And I mean that when 3 out of 4 fourth graders can't read at grade level, there's a problem. After the COVID lockdowns, the average student's 3/4 of grade level behind. We got to get back to basics. We got to make sure that there's accountability, there's transparency, not just within the budget, but in the policies that's being implemented here in the state of Michigan.
We might as well dive right into the education part of this, since we have Darren and Tim here. You guys are key members on the education part of this. Darren, do you agree with that, first of all? And when it comes to the education part of this, you mentioned the July 1st deadline. This is key for school districts, higher ed, to make sure they have all their budgets in place.
Of course, it's critical. That's why the Senate passed our budget back in April. We've been waiting for the House Republicans to do their part. They finally did about 2 weeks ago, really close to the deadline here, which is why I think now folks are trying to scramble to meet the July 1st deadline. We've been prepared. We passed a balanced school budget, to be very clear on that front. And we're still waiting on the House Republicans to pass a general budget. We don't know how they want to pay for fixing the roads or pay for public safety. We put our plan out there. And so we're ready to get to a deal. We've been ready to get to a deal. And our hope is that we can find some common ground. Representative Kelly and myself have had some good conversations there, but we still have a long way to go, I would say, before we finally get to a budget that all of us can vote on.
Tim, it seems like each side keeps saying, we've done our part, but you're not. Where do you see it as where we go from here to try and get this done?
I think we're on track to get something done. Honestly, I think that, as Senator Camilleri has mentioned, we've had some productive meetings, and another one yesterday kind of fell apart at the end on trying to get some additional gifts, or not gifts, but gets for us. And nonetheless, we're ready to work through the weekend if we have to. We want to see if we can get a vote on Tuesday.
Joe, do you think the July 1st deadline is feasible at this point? It seems like everybody's very skeptical, considering not even one element, either whether it's education, the general fund, roads, which we have to talk about. None of those are tied up quite yet.
Well, each day that goes by, we get closer to July 1. It's just going to make it more challenging. What I will say about the budget process, being, Speaker of the House last session and looking at it historically, when you look at K through 12 budgets, even during the Snyder administration, the K through 12 budget was done in July so that schools had time to prepare. Yeah. So if we move past this mark, I mean, it really shows that, there are some missed opportunities, on our side and really a failure, because if we can't get this done, and parties aside, whoever's in charge, we've gotten this done in July 1. So I hope that we can meet that mark.
As former speaker, you say it's a failure. Whose failure is it? A lot of people point the finger at Matt Hall. Is it his fault? Is it the governor's fault? Where do you see it?
Well, I can say as Speaker, over the past 2 years, we got a balanced budget done on time before July 1. So there's a difference in leadership now than last year, just last year.
I just want to suggest that this July 1 date is less critical, I think, than most people would think. I mean, there's still several, 3 or 4 months left on the budget that they already know they have. They've been crafting budgets for the last month or two. We gave them direction a little bit with at least it's $10,000 on ours. The floor was $10.25, yours was $10.08. So you can build budgets off that. Yeah. Everything else is kind of extraneous. So I don't think that this is as big a deal. This is kind of more of an inside baseball game than it.
Well, I know there's no penalties, but yeah. I mean, cities, townships, and like we mentioned, schools, I mean, they count on that sometimes, don't they? Or you're saying
they do.
It's not as important?
My point is, if it goes a day or two, past the deadline, or even if it went, quite honestly, to October, which I don't think it's going to happen, I don't think it would be that big a deal.
That was my next question.
But if I may, though, on that point, it is the law. We passed a law that the governor signed that these budgets will be done by July 1st. And so we're at a point now where we've done our part in the Senate on both budgets. The House has done their part on an education budget. They have not passed a regular budget. And so the people of Michigan are looking for their priorities. And it's been hard for us to really come together on a full agreement because we have not seen those priorities out of the House. And so to your point about who's to blame, Speaker Hall is the reason that we are at this point. I think that we found some momentum on the education budget. My hope is we still get there by July 1. But when it comes to an overall deal, each budget goes together. You can't fix the roads without knowing how much money you can spend on schools, without knowing how much money you can spend on public safety. It all is together in one pot of money. And then we have this big problem right now where we don't know how much money we're going to be cut from the federal government. Because as Speaker Hall mentioned in his trip to Washington, D.C., taking away an entire week of our budget process, he supports cuts to Medicaid. Well, that's going to blow a major hole in our general fund budget.
I think people are tired of kind of the finger pointing and blame games. There's a lot of major issues here in Michigan that need to be taken on, whether it's local roads, whether it's the quality of our schools, whether it's making sure that students in high school are ready to be career ready to go on to college and with that performance base. But we're not getting the basics done right now. And with the governor last week going off to Australia, that's not helpful in terms of the current negotiations. They should have been in helping get that done.
The House was
the House was there for a day working with the White House and working with President Trump. And if the Senate Democrats would spend more time in actually negotiating instead of doing speeches against President Trump this week, we probably would have been a little farther along. But at the end of the day, there's major problems here in the state of Michigan, whether it's local roads, whether it's making sure students are able to learn and read. And how do we get back to the basics of making sure that the money's going to the classroom, that we're empowering students, and we're empowering parents to making sure that our next generation is able to be successful? In the last few years, with what we've seen out of Lansing, is not working for our students in the schools.
Let's hold that thought. I want to get back into it right after this break and talk about one huge element that might become part of this budget. Right after this, more Flashpoint. Stay there. We are diving into the budget this week on Flashpoint with our roundtable of lawmakers. And one thing we didn't quite get to yet, and I'll go right around the table, start with you, Representative Tate. Is there a chance the governor can finally see a roads plan get done as part of this budget before it's hammered out?
I think there is. I think there's an opportunity. I mean, this has been a conversation that's been ongoing for a decade plus. Now, I think in terms of what we're seeing with conversations and ongoing conversations, I think there is an opportunity. But you have to be able to negotiate this as a whole. Right. You can't get to roads
now, or at least the July 1 deadline.
Absolutely. It has to be laid bare, everything across the budget. And I think Speaker Hall needs to make sure that there's everything that's laid bare in order to negotiate and get a roads deal done.
And we know he has a plan as well as the governor. So does that make it tougher if you try and hammer it out during a
Well, they're pretty vastly different. Yeah. One raises taxes substantially and another one doesn't. I've been a part of the legislature when we voted to raise the gas tax, and I don't want to do it again, and I don't think we need to do it again. I think we've shown that we've how to do this, and I just, as you know, Senator Camilleri and I were talking the other day. I said, I don't think you want to go to the polls next year having raised gas tax, or a corporate income tax, or any other scheme that they want to do to raise income. I think the money's there. It's just about priorities.
Senators, can we get roads done in this?
Oh, I sure hope so. This is the point, is that the House Republicans in a bipartisan fashion came forward with a roads plan that first makes sure 100% of the taxes collected at the pump actually go to roads, and all this corporate welfare and these business subsidies that continue to distort the economy. Let's get back to putting Michigan workers first, and that means that instead of funding some of these most profitable woke corporations, some related to the Chinese Communist Party, invest in our roads and bridges and infrastructure. And my hope is that we can spend this time to get to a roads plan that actually fixes local roads and actually fixes the roads that are most used. Unfortunately, 6 years ago, the governor went it alone, borrowed $3.5 billion. Those bills are starting to come due. And this means that our local roads, our counties, cities, and villages are actually going to see a cut coming up, because those bonds are needing to be paid back. Let's get to a solution after you've seen state government spending increase by 45% over the last 6 years. The money's in the budget. We can go ahead and find that money and invest in the critical infrastructure that we need to grow our economy and invest in our workers.
Thoughts on that?
I mean, look, we can do a roads deal. I hope that we get to some version of a deal before this year is over, because nobody has to tell me about roads. I've secured money in my time in the legislature to help fix the Groseal Bridge or the Denton Road Bridge in Belleville, or solve these block train crossings in my district in Woodhaven. These are big priorities for my residents, but we do need a long-term sustainable funding plan to ensure that all of these local roads are fixed. I think there's some common ground here on that idea. The problem, obviously, is how do you pay for it? But what I'm hearing is that there is an opportunity to hold big corporations accountable that I think some of us could get behind. Maybe it is looking at some of these subsidies that have not worked. I think that there's some appetite there on the Democratic side of things to have that be part of the conversation. But it also should be a component of this should be raising corporate income taxes. We have a way too low number here in the Midwest, even compared to other states. And so they have to pay their fair share as well. And so I don't want to put any tax increase on the backs of working people. I think that that's probably a shared priority. But let's look at these larger corporations, that how can they participate in this as well, because they're using the roads just as much as anybody else.
2 years ago, we had that opportunity, a $9 billion surplus. Senate Republicans and others kept coming in. Let's take half of that and put that into fixing our roads and bridges. Heck, we still have flooding this morning on the lodge from rain, right?
No, well, that might not be from rain,
but this is the challenge.
It was a fire hydrant issue.
But this is the challenge: is a lot of these issues around, whether it's Metro Detroit or around the state of Michigan, could be fixed from real capital investment. In the last 2 years, they blew through a $9 billion surplus with a Democrat governor, Democrat House and Senate. Yeah, I get it. Let's not play the blame game right now. How do you go ahead and address these issues going forward? And we have the opportunity right now to sit down and to work on a plan that actually solves some of these problems, whether it's education, whether it's infrastructure. Let's go ahead and spend the time that we need to fix these big issues.
Last thing, and this for anybody, but just on the budget part of this, we haven't heard much from Governor Whitmer in the process here. Should she be more vocal at this point, or do you see it? Should she leave it up to the leadership to just get this done? What's her role in this?
Or fly off to Australia.
Well, I can only speak from my experiences. So as speaker, I mean, the governor was engaged in these budget conversations, and we got a budget done on time and balanced.
Was it mostly behind the scenes, or, I mean, like when you creep up to the July 1st, you might think she might be more vocal publicly?
Well, there are more conversation. And I know that, obviously there's opportunities, there's state of the state. I think that was something that was outlined as well, too. But also there has to be some reactions as well, too. I mean, the House has to get it also finish their first chamber budgets as well, too. And I think, speaking to, priorities and issues as well, too, as we're talking about with the budget, because I know it's a document of our values, let's continue to have these conversations too about how we're helping working people and working families as well too. This is something that we've talked about over the past couple of years. We expanded EITC. We didn't get any support, I think, on the other side of the aisle for things like that or
Chucked
seniors.
It in with a big corporate welfare scheme 2 years ago. That was what you put in as part of the tax spend. Yeah, but you decided to go it alone. And this is the challenge. I think people want folks to come together. And now with a Republican House, and it's still a Democrat Senate, and a Democrat governor, let's sit down and let's work on some of these toughest issues that are out there. But this was the thing, is when you guys had a 1-seat majority in the House and Senate, that you jammed through the corporate welfare along with some other, social welfare handouts that you guys wanted to do. You did it purposely on going alone instead of working together with Republicans.
As far as the governor's participation, we appreciate her re-engagement yesterday evening and some of these talks at a higher level. And I think that they've been helpful, and I think it'll help spur us to get this done.
Yeah,
Senator, take the last word on this.
The governor was in the Capitol last night with the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader. I think that she is all in on getting a deal. We've got to all obviously agree, which has been some of the problem. I mean, the legislature has been controlled by Republicans for 40 years. The Senate was a Republican-led majority for 40 years. This is the first time we've found some different versions of the legislature, and it's going to take some growing pains for all of us to find common ground. I think we can get there, and I'm still an eternal optimist. My hope, though, is that we can meet about July 1st, and if not on the 1st, sometime shortly after.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would like to see that. Let me get to another important topic I wanted to bring up since I had 4 lawmakers here. We've seen so much more political violence these days, almost to the point where some people say it's like the 1960s all over again. We saw what happened to our governor. The president was shot at once, and 2 plots against him. And then recently, state lawmakers in Minnesota were targeted, and some of those in Michigan were on that same list. How much does this concern you as lawmakers? And I know I have 2 here with higher political aspirations, at least at the moment. And how do we turn down the temperature in America? I'll start with you, Senator.
It's frightening. I'll be honest. I mean, no matter if you're an elected official or somebody who's participating in a protest, people are being targeted for their speech and for their actions in the public. That's not how we should be engaging in our democracy. I believe in peaceful actions of protest and honest disagreements. I think there's an opportunity for us, even if we don't agree on a policy issue, to still talk it out and find common ground. But for state lawmakers now to be targeted, in addition to some of these higher political positions, we're entering a frightening era in American politics. I hope that folks can turn down their rhetoric and turn down the temperature here, because this type of violence is horrible. A lawmaker and her husband are dead. Yeah. They're dead, and we've just moved on from the conversation. Yeah.
As a farm boy, middle of 5 kids, that I think a lot of folks say you can disagree without being disagreeable. I was always, how do you find consensus and move forward? There are political differences. There's a reason why there's 2 major parties in America that have very different views and visions for where to take the country and where to take the state. But when you have protesters that are out there saying 86-47, saying that they want to see the assassination and removal of President Trump, that's really troubling. And you see that. I've seen that every Saturday for the last month as I've went around to different Republican events or Lincoln Day dinners around the state.
I have less than a minute, by the way.
And that's the kind of stuff that needs to be condemned, and saying we need to get back. It's about the ballot box, and it's about the discussion. It's not about violence.
Real quickly, gentlemen, quick thoughts on how to turn the temperature down.
I think it's just a matter of all of us, paying attention to what we're saying and trying to, escape using inflammatory language and things that just don't belong in the political space.
Representative Tate, 10 seconds.
I agree. The political violence has no place here, and we need to make sure that we are toning down the temperature while still getting our points across.
I really appreciate all of your thoughts on that, as well as the budget. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to wrap up this edition. Coming up next, more Flashpoint. Finally, let's dive into the mailbag this morning. Got some thoughts on last week's discussion on DEI with local black business leaders. John in Plymouth writes, I particularly like the comment you made about DEI and how a good argument you can make for it is if you think of it in opposite terms. People can perform and perform well if given the chance. Well, in fairness, that was Pete Buttigieg's comment, not mine, but still appreciate it. Greg in Macomb sees it differently. There is a major flaw in each and every DEI program, namely lowering of standards and or qualifications. How can you not even mention that? And where was any corporate representation who has had to live with these lowered standards to their detriment of their organization? Not surprisingly, nowhere to be found. Doing so on your part would be admitting that there are two sides to this story. All of your guests don't live in the real world. They don't have to deal with being forced to hire someone less qualified because of DEI. That email is from Greg. Following the death of Pete Rose, I gave 4 reasons why he should not be in the Hall of Fame, and I knew I'd get some emails on this one. I totally agree with you that Pete Rose should not be inducted into the Hall of Fame, Carol writes. He knew what he was doing and the consequences it would cost him. Although I do think I changed the mind of Rick in Canton. He wrote, I am at odds with my entire family on this issue, as I have always felt that Rose should have been eligible for induction, at least as a player. Your piece was very provocative and emphasized 3 points I've been arguing for some time, but where you got me was the 4th point on how accessible gambling is today and what message that sends. That was powerful for me. I wonder how much online gambling already affects professional sports. No matter, that's the wrong message to send. That's from Rick. Got this email from last week's conversation with Republican Tom Leonard, who's running for governor, and his answer on how he would improve kids' 3rd grade reading scores. Leonard's proposal would be to hire tutors to aid teachers to help raise the state's abysmal education ratings. Is he talking about tutors hired by the state, local school districts through state funding, or a state-sponsored private company offering tutoring services? I guess that remains to be seen. I think his answer will be fascinating. That's from John in Plymouth. Finally, from Sonia, on our random question of several candidates up at Mackinac, asking them what song they would use if they were a Detroit Tiger. Well, she says, I love the walk-up music question. It made me smile at a time when too much in politics is overwhelmingly negative. Cannot disagree with that, Sonia. And by the way, mine would be Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. Think about it. Send us your email to us at flashpoint@clickondetroit.com. That is our show this week. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We'll see you later.